These are 15 major transformations hitting Jamaica's airports in 2026 that will completely reshape how millions of travelers experience the Caribbean's most visited island. Revolutionary biometric systems are replacing every traditional checkpoint you've known, while enforcement of long-ignored regulations has reached levels that are catching tourists completely off guard. And the combination means your next trip through Sangster International or Norman Manley International will look nothing like your last one. Right now, Jamaica's two gateway airports are undergoing the most aggressive modernization program in Caribbean aviation history. Sangster International in Montego Bay and Norman Manley International in Kingston handle more than 70% of everyone who visits Jamaica, which translates to millions of passengers moving through facilities that are being rebuilt from the ground up with technology most travelers have never encountered. The numbers tell the story. $152 million invested in fiscal year 2025 to 2026 alone, with another $372 million committed through 2029. And when you factor in the completely new $460 million international airport planned for Little London in Westmoreland, you're looking at nearly $1 billion reshaping how people enter and exit this island. What that means for you depends entirely on whether you understand what's changed and what hasn't, which is exactly what we're about to break down in detail that will save you time, money, and potentially serious legal trouble. The biometric revolution that eliminates your passport routine starting in early 2026. The entire concept of showing your passport repeatedly at different checkpoints becomes obsolete at Jamaica's major airports. Sangster International already activated biometric gates for arriving passengers back in May of 2025 using facial recognition technology from CETA and operated through Jamaica's passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency. But what's rolling out in the first quarter of 2026 extends that system to departures and creates what Shane Munro, the CEO of MBJ Airports Limited, calls a single biometric identity. That phrase sounds like corporate jargon until you understand what it actually means in practice. One facial scan gets captured when you check in using the new self-service kiosks, and that biometric signature follows you through every subsequent interaction with airport systems without you having to present physical documents again. E-gates at security replace the traditional passport control stations where officers manually verify your identity. And when you reach your departure gate, facial recognition handles boarding verification while your passport stays tucked in your bag. The system already processes arriving passengers through immigration without them speaking to a single officer, unless something flags for additional review. And when departures come online fully in 2026, the entire journey from curb to aircraft becomes essentially contactless. Munro explained the philosophy behind the investment by saying their implementation of these advanced biometric systems is transforming the passenger journey while keeping pace with global digital innovations in aviation, which is a measured way of saying Jamaica isn't asking whether travelers want this technology, but rather accepting that modern air travel demands it. Privacy concerns exist and they're legitimate, but here's the reality. Over 200 airports across the United States already deployed similar facial recognition systems, and every major international airport from London to Singapore to Dubai operates variations of this technology. Jamaica isn't pioneering something experimental, but catching up to what became the global standard while most of us weren't paying attention. And the old manual process will still exist technically, but it's being designed as the slow lane that nobody wants to use. The bottom line shapes up simply. You cannot opt out of biometric scanning and still move through these airports at normal speed, which means your face becomes your ticket, your passport, your boarding pass, and every other form of verification you previously handled with documents. The cannabis confusion that sends tourists to jail. Jamaica decriminalized marijuana possession up to 2 ounces back in 2015, legalized home cultivation of up to 5 plants per household, built a licensed medical marijuana industry, complete with dispensaries in tourist areas, including one called Island Strains located right at Sangster International Airport, just 5 minutes away in the Hip Strip, and created the impression among millions of visitors that cannabis moves freely through Jamaican society. Everything in that sentence accurately describes what happens on the island, and none of it applies to what you can do at the airport. The Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act of 2015 changed possession laws for Jamaican soil but left international travel regulations completely untouched, which creates a trap that catches tourists every single year. Bringing cannabis into Jamaica from anywhere triggers federal drug laws in your departure country, regardless of local marijuana legality. And attempting to leave Jamaica with cannabis in any form gets classified as drug trafficking with penalties that include serious prison time, not fines or warnings but actual incarceration. Listen to how Jamaica Tour Base frames the warning in language that doesn't leave room for misunderstanding. If you attempt to leave the island with marijuana, you can face serious jail time because, while authorities may relax on other offenses, drug trafficking is dealt with harshly in Jamaica. Drug trafficking means what it says, not possession, not personal use, but trafficking. And that charge carries weight that will destroy your vacation and potentially your future travel plans permanently. What about medical marijuana cards from states where cannabis is fully legal? Completely irrelevant at airports because U.S. federal law still classifies marijuana as a schedule, a controlled substance, which means carrying it through any airport, including on international flights, can lead to immediate arrest regardless of what state laws permit. The disconnect between state and federal law creates confusion, but airport security operates under federal jurisdiction, and federal rules prohibit cannabis entirely. On the island itself, possession without a prescription results in a fine of 500 Jamaican dollars, which converts to roughly 3 to 5 US dollars, practically a parking ticket, and medical marijuana cards for tourists can be purchased at dispensaries or even at the airport for about $10 to $20 with minimal paperwork. The system actively encourages legal acquisition and use while you're visiting, selling you cannabis right there in the airport's commercial zone. But the moment you try to carry any amount through security checkpoints or pack it in luggage for your departure flight, you've crossed into criminal territory. Make sure you're catching this before we go further, because understanding these airport changes could save you from making expensive mistakes. If you're finding this breakdown useful, subscribe to help us reach 20,000 subscribers, and drop a comment telling us which Jamaica airport you fly into most often. Because we're planning more Caribbean travel content based on what you actually want to know. The meat and dairy ban that destroys Grandma's Care Package, UK government travel, advice states with zero ambiguity that it is illegal to bring meat and dairy products into Jamaica. Not restricted or limited, but illegal. And the guidance continues by noting that customs officials may search your baggage and will destroy banned foodstuffs without compensation or appeal. Visitors from the United States and Canada particularly struggle with this rule, because bringing food for family or accommodating special diets feels natural when traveling. But Jamaica's agricultural sector depends on maintaining disease-free status for livestock and crop diseases that could devastate local farming if introduced through contaminated imports. The Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining established specific protocols for anyone who genuinely needs to import meat products for personal use. And the requirements include obtaining a meat inspection certificate from an approved government veterinary division or Ministry of Agriculture, securing a stamp of approval on all carcasses, and acquiring an import license from the Ministry of Agriculture in Jamaica. The Jamaica Tourist Board can assist with arranging the license if you provide 2 weeks advance notice, which tells you everything about whether this process makes sense for typical tourists bringing a few pounds of bacon or some cheese. 2 weeks to get permission for your lunch meat. The practical answer writes itself: don't bring meat or dairy at all. Exceptions exist in specific categories. Canned or jarred items generally pass through customs without issue. Dried or processed foods are acceptable, and cod fish gets specifically mentioned as allowed in the regulations. Packaged snacks like cereal bars, crackers, and chips in their original packaging will clear security. But that block of cheddar you wanted to share with your cousin, or the fresh chicken you planned to cook, or the milk for your morning coffee, all get confiscated and destroyed on the spot. And here's one that blindsides people every time. Honey and all honey byproducts are strictly prohibited, not restricted or permit required, but completely banned. Jamaica maintains disease-free status for various bee-related ailments that plague other countries, and the economic value of that protected status far outweighs any tourist's desire to bring in a jar of local honey from home. The pet import rule that allows only British dogs and cats. Jamaica Customs Agency operates one of the most restrictive pet import policies in the entire Caribbean, and the rule breaks down to a single sentence that solves nothing for most travelers. Only dogs and cats from the United Kingdom and Ireland may be imported into Jamaica. Dogs from the United States, not allowed. Cats from Canada, not allowed. Birds, rabbits, ferrets, hamsters, or any other companion animal from anywhere, not allowed under any circumstances. This isn't about paperwork or vaccinations or quarantine periods, but about country of origin as an absolute barrier, which relates to rabies-free status and disease control measures that Jamaica considers non-negotiable. If you're planning to relocate to Jamaica with pets or thinking your emotional support animal will accompany you on vacation, the answer depends entirely on whether that animal is a dog or cat currently living in the UK or Ireland. And if not, you're making other arrangements or leaving the pet behind. The drone dead zone surrounding every airport. Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority regulations prohibit flying drones within 3 miles of any airport, helipad, or designated landing zone, which translates to 5,000 meters or 16,500 feet of restricted airspace around Sangster International, Norman Manley International, Ian Fleming International in Ocho Rios, and every smaller airport across the island. Customs officers at arrival checkpoints regularly inspect travelers carrying drone-sized bags and demand to see JCAA authorization before allowing the equipment into the country. And arriving without proper permits can result in immediate confiscation with no recourse. Flying drones in restricted zones triggers serious penalties beyond just equipment seizure. And Jamaica's compact geography means airports sit close to resorts and popular tourist destinations, which creates overlap that catches photographers off guard. Central Kingston and Montego Bay operate under heavy flight restrictions due to airport proximity, and even tourist attractions enforce no-fly policies. Dunn's River Falls, one of the most photographed locations in Jamaica, prohibits drones without explicit authorization from both site managers and the JCAA obtained in advance. Recreational drone operators don't need permits, but must follow strict operational rules, including maximum altitude of 400 feet above ground, maximum range of 500 meters from the operator, maintaining visual line of sight at all times, flying during daylight hours only, and staying clear of crowds and gatherings. Commercial drone operators conducting any photography or videography for business purposes need a permit before each individual flight, not a blanket license but specific authorization for each session. Enforcement has intensified as drone technology became affordable and popular, which means what might have been ignored 5 years ago now results in confiscation, fines, and potential criminal charges. The liquid restriction that hasn't changed but still catches everyone. Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority follows the international standard known as the 3-to-1-to-1 rule for liquids, aerosols, and gels. And this regulation catches more travelers than almost any other because people consistently underestimate how many items fall into these categories. One transparent plastic bag that holds 1 quart or 1 liter total, containing individual containers that hold no more than 3.4 ounces or 100 milliliters each. And that includes beverages, shampoo, suntan lotion, cream, toothpaste, hair gel, spray, and anything else that flows or spreads. All liquids, aerosols, and gels must be declared at the security screening checkpoint with no exceptions. And anything exceeding 100 milliliters per container must go in checked baggage. Baby formula and medically prescribed items qualify for exemptions, but you must declare them to the port security officer, who will verify that your liquids fit within exemption categories and exist in quantities reasonably necessary for your journey. And when required, you must provide proof of authenticity showing these are legitimate medical or infant care products. What trips people up now is the powder rule adopted from TSA standards. Powdered substances over 12 ounces or 340 grams must be placed in checked luggage, not carry-on bags. This restriction includes cosmetics like loose powder makeup, coffee whether ground or instant, spices in any form, and basically anything with powder or granular consistency that exceeds the weight limit. Baby formula and medically prescribed powdered medications get exempted, and powders purchased after clearing security in the departure lounge are approved for carry-on since they've already been screened. But anything you pack from home needs to follow the weight limits or go in checked bags. The sharp object ban that extends further than you think. Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority maintains comprehensive prohibited cabin item lists that reach beyond obvious weapons into everyday tools and accessories that travelers pack without thinking. Knives of any length cannot go in cabin baggage except rounded blade butter knives and plastic cutlery, which means your small pocket knife or multi-tool or even a basic kitchen knife all get confiscated at security. Box cutters, utility knives, and razor blades not enclosed in cartridges face absolute prohibition, though safety razors with cartridges are permitted. Scissors with metal-pointed tips get banned even if the blades measure under 2 inches, and the list continues through items people genuinely don't expect. Axes and hatchets regardless of size, ice picks, meat cleavers, any type of saw including battery-powered models, screwdrivers except the tiny ones in eyeglass repair kits, and decorative items like swords, sword canes, or umbrella swords. Club-like items face the same restrictions. Sending baseball bats, cricket bats, golf clubs, hockey sticks, ski poles, and lacrosse sticks to checked baggage along with pool cues, hammers, wrenches, pliers, crowbars, brass knuckles, and martial arts weapons including nunchucks and cue batons. Tradespeople traveling with tools or athletes bringing sports equipment need to pack everything in checked luggage, because the cabin rules enforce strictly with no exceptions for professional need or inconvenience. The duty-free limits that punish you for going over Jamaica updated its duty-free allowances on April 1st of 2024, and these current limits remain in effect through 2026 with one critical detail that catches people. If you exceed the limit, Customs calculates duties on the full value of everything you're bringing, not just the amount over the threshold. Personal and household items at airports qualify for duty-free treatment up to $1,000 if you're 18 years or older, increased from the previous $500 limit, while imported goods at ports get a $100 threshold that doubled from the old $50 limit. That full value calculation means bringing $1,100 worth of items doesn't result in duties on $100, but on the entire $1,100, which can shock travelers who assume duty charges would apply only to the excess amount. Alcohol allowances permit 2 liters total duty-free, but 0 liters of Jamaican rum qualify for duty-free status because Jamaica protects its rum industry by refusing to give tax breaks on locally produced spirits, even when visitors try to bring bottles back into the country. Tobacco products for travelers 18 and older allow 200 cigarettes or 50 cigars, or 230 grams of processed tobacco. Not a combination, but one of those three options. And perfume limits sit at 340 milliliters of eau de toilette. Cash or traveler's checks worth $10,000 or more trigger mandatory declaration requirements on your C5 form plus completion of the Financial Investigation Division cross-border form that a customs officer provides. And failing to declare currency, as required, constitutes a breach of the Jamaican Customs Act that can result in seizure of the money and additional fines on top. The fresh produce ban that requires government certificates. Fresh fruits and vegetables need phytosanitary certificates from the Ministry of Industry, Agriculture and Fisheries before entering Jamaica, and live plants and seeds cannot come into the country without agricultural permits obtained prior to travel, which means you can't decide at the airport to declare the orange in your bag and hope for leniency. Certain processed items face restrictions too. Coconut derivatives, including coconut oil and soap, require permits from the Coconut Industry Board, creating bureaucratic hurdles for items that seem harmless. Dried or processed fruits and vegetables generally clear customs without permits. Packaged snacks in original sealed containers typically pass inspection, and canned or jarred items move through without issues in most cases. Fresh produce, though, leave it home or plan to buy it after arrival, because Jamaica's supermarkets and resort area stores stock major international brands alongside local alternatives that will serve your needs without the customs headache. The 3-hour window that stopped being optional. Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority recommends arriving at the airport at least 3 hours before departure. And this timeline shifted from suggestion to necessity as biometric systems roll out and passenger volumes continue increasing year over year. Check-in procedures, security screening, baggage handling, and any shopping or dining in the departure lounge all consume time that adds up faster than travelers expect. And during the transition period, while staff and passengers adapt to new biometric technology, processing times show more variation than the airport operators would prefer. Congestion patterns at Jamaica's airports depend heavily on flight schedules, and wait times to move through screening protocols and immigration can exceed 1 hour when multiple international flights arrive simultaneously. Peak tourist seasons from December through April and again in summer months create crowd situations that are difficult to avoid no matter how efficiently the systems operate. And the 3-hour buffer provides room for unexpected delays like long security lines, baggage check complications, or documentation problems that need resolving before you can board. The weapons permit process that requires ministry approval. All firearms, weapons, explosives, and fireworks require permits from the Ministry of National Security or the Trade Board before you can legally bring them into Jamaica. And this includes every category of gun from hand guns and flare guns to BB guns and realistic replicas, plus stun guns, rifles, shotguns, pellet guns, starter pistols, and compressed air guns. Shocking devices and cattle prods face the same permit requirements, and the application process takes significant time that makes last-minute arrangements impossible. Legitimate reasons for importing firearms exist. People relocating permanently to Jamaica, competitive shooters participating in sanctioned events, or specialized security personnel might qualify for permits. But the process demands working with Jamaican authorities well in advance of travel with proper documentation and justification. Average tourists have no path to bringing weapons of any kind, which should be obvious, but apparently needs stating clearly based on the number of people who ask. The seafood ban. Nobody expects live or processed conch and lobster are strictly prohibited from import into Jamaica, a specific restriction that catches travelers moving between Caribbean islands where these seafoods are plentiful and inexpensive. Jamaica protects its own marine resources and prevents introduction of diseases or invasive species that could damage local ecosystems, which means bringing fresh conch from the Bahamas or lobster from Turks and Caicos will result in confiscation at customs regardless of how well you packed it. The dead battery rule that grounds your electronic security directives implemented after July 2014 allow officers to require that passengers power on electronic devices at screening checkpoints, and devices that fail to turn on will not be permitted through security or onto aircraft. Your laptop, tablet, phone, camera, and any other battery-operated device must have enough charge to demonstrate functionality, which means showing up with a dead phone or a laptop that won't boot can prevent you from bringing those items past security at all. The security measure emerged in response to specific terror threats involving concealed explosives in electronic devices. And while it creates inconvenience for travelers who depleted their batteries during long journeys or layovers, the requirement became a permanent fixture of airport security worldwide. Charge your devices before approaching security or risk leaving them behind, because officers won't make exceptions for dead batteries regardless of your explanation. The Animal Product Declaration Law, that covers more than you think Jamaican law, requires travelers to declare all products of animal origin on the Customs C5 declaration form in Section 13. And the definition of animal products extends far beyond meat to include eggs, dairy, fish, and fishery products, taxidermy items like mounted heads or horns or tails, feathers, pet food, feed supplements, veterinary medicinal products, and even reproductive materials like semen, embryos, and eggs used in agriculture or research. Personal or non-commercial imports of animal products are allowed up to 45 kilograms total, but only if properly declared, and only if the products arrive in original packaging that bears seals or stamps from competent authorities indicating what the product contains. Proof of country of origin is mandatory, and requirements may be adjusted at any time as international disease situations change, which means what cleared customs last year might face new restrictions this year based on outbreaks or agricultural concerns that emerged in the interim. When doubt exists about whether something needs declaration, declare it anyway, because penalties for failing to declare can include confiscation, fines, and in serious cases criminal charges for attempting to smuggle prohibited agricultural products. The pat-down protocol, you cannot refuse pat-downs, resolve alarms triggered by metal detectors and form part of randomized security processes at checkpoints. And while most passengers never experience them, selection for pat-down screening is not optional. Rights exist within the process, though. You can request that the pat-down be conducted in a private room away from public view. You can request a witness of your choice to observe the procedure. And officers conducting pat-downs must be the same gender as the passenger, with absolute enforcement that males do not pat down females. Officers must explain the pat-down process before beginning and maintain communication throughout the procedure. And passengers with medical devices need to inform officers immediately so proper accommodation can be made. Minimizing your chances of triggering a pat-down comes down to preparation. Empty all pockets completely before approaching the metal detector. Avoid wearing clothing with high metal content like jeans with metal rivets or jackets with metal zippers. Remove heavy jewelry or wait to put it on after clearing security. Take off belts with metal buckles. And place coins and keys in your bag or request a plastic bin for small items. Body piercings create inevitable conflicts with metal detectors, which means either removing them before security or accepting that pat-down screening will follow, because the sensitivity of detection equipment leaves no middle ground for metal objects anywhere on your body. What all these changes mean when you add them up, Jamaica is investing $152 million in fiscal year 2025 to 2026 on airport infrastructure. Another $372 million committed through 2029, and planning a completely new $460 million international airport in Little London, Westmoreland, which puts total spending near $1 billion, reshaping how people enter and exit this island. These aren't cosmetic updates or minor technology refreshes, but fundamental transformation of the entire airport experience, driven by security requirements, efficiency demands, and international standards that Jamaica must meet to remain competitive in global tourism markets. Shane Munro framed the philosophy by saying airports serve as gateways and are the first and last impression of the destination, and their implementation of advanced biometric systems is transforming the passenger journey while keeping pace with global digital innovations in aviation. That first and last impression carries weight when Sangster International Airport processes over 70% of Jamaica's visitors and feeds a tourism industry worth $3.8 billion annually, because inefficient, outdated, or insecure airports damage the entire economic ecosystem that depends on visitor spending. The biometric technology rolling out in 2026 will feel seamless once you adapt to it, eliminating the constant fumbling for passports at every checkpoint and replacing manual identity verification with facial recognition that follows you from check-in to boarding. Cannabis enforcement will continue catching tourists who misunderstand the difference between island possession laws and airport travel restrictions, and those consequences include jail time, not fines. Agricultural restrictions protecting Jamaica from disease introduction will keep confiscating meat, dairy, honey, fresh produce, and specific seafoods regardless of how much travelers protest about personal use or small quantities. Know these rules before you pack. Embrace the biometric systems instead of fighting them. Give yourself the full 3-hour arrival window during this transition period. Charge your electronics. Empty your pockets. Declare questionable items instead of hiding them. These small preparations create massive differences in whether your airport experience becomes smooth and forgettable or turns into a nightmare of delays, confiscations, and legal problems. Jamaica in 2026 will feel different from Jamaica even 2 years ago, more efficient in some ways and more strictly regulated in others, more technologically sophisticated across every interaction. The warmth of the people, the beauty of the beaches, the richness of the culture, none of that changes. But the airports are getting dramatically better at moving you through security and immigration safely, quickly, and efficiently to reach the actual reason you came. Understand these changes, respect these rules, prepare accordingly, and your vacation starts the moment you land instead of getting derailed at customs. These are the 15 transformations you cannot ignore when traveling through Jamaica's airports in 2026, and knowing them in detail before you fly makes all the difference between frustration and smooth sailing.